We begin in South America, where the presidents of Argentina, Paraguay, and Uruguay attended a World Jewish Congress Security Forum in Buenos Aires and a commemoration for the 30th anniversary of an attack on a Jewish center in Argentina's capital that left 85 people dead. It will be 3 decades in which politics and justice were either accomplices and accessories to the crime or impotent actors who turned their backs on the tragedy while those responsible escaped unscathed, says Javier Milei, Argentina's president. Also, Paraguayan President Santiago Pena confirmed that Paraguay will once again move its embassy to Jerusalem, capital of the State of Israel, one of Paraguay's strategic allies. In North America, President Joe Biden tested positive for COVID-19, where he was in Las Vegas for a series of events, the White House said in a statement, with White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre saying Biden tested positive following his first event in Las Vegas. Biden's doctor, Dr. Kevin O'Connor, said in a statement released by the White House that he was tested after he experienced upper respiratory symptoms. His doctor said he has already taken his first dose of Paxlovid, a medication that is associated with reducing the chance of hospitalization or death. Jean-Pierre said he is returning to Delaware, where he will self-isolate and will continue to carry out all his duties fully during that time. Biden has already scheduled to head to Delaware after his visit to Las Vegas. Biden, who had been expected to speak at the group's event in Las Vegas, was about an hour and a half late before the announcement was made. We now head to Europe, where a UK public inquiry has found that the government's processes, planning and policy failed the country's citizens in lead up to the COVID-19 pandemic. The inquiry's report states that the UK was unprepared for the pandemic, which resulted in over 235,000 deaths. It identifies several significant flaws, including preparing for the wrong type of pandemic. The report calls for radical reform, including a major overhaul of how the government prepares for civil emergencies. The inquiry's chair, Baroness Heather Hallett, says that the country's emergency systems failed and that this cannot be allowed to happen again. The report makes 10 recommendations, including the creation of a single independent body responsible for pandemic preparedness and response. Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer has committed to learning from the inquiry's findings and putting better measures in place to protect the country from future pandemics. To further discuss this, I'm being joined by Thamsakwa Zhou, journalist and global affairs analyst. Thank you so much for joining us on the news.
Thank you for having me, Lepa.
So, Tham, please, can you tell us some of the main outcomes of the COVID inquiry?
Well, first of all, it was quite extensive. There were so many witnesses that we saw go into the inquiry. I think it's important to talk about process before talking about the outcomes, because that outcome you have just told the viewers in the intro is a product of a very detailed process that included former Prime Minister Boris Johnson, who was Prime Minister at the time. Rishi Sunak was Prime Minister later. There are so many people, the former ministers who were responsible for health, all the people that handled COVID at that time, as well as representatives of families and those that were lost. So some of the outcomes are really detailing the fact that the United Kingdom was ill-prepared for the type of pandemic that it was. There were many findings in terms of how hospitals were not ready, the PPE or the equipment that people needed to use was not ready. The government itself, it is said that it wasn't prepared, and there were no lessons, most importantly, no lessons that appeared to have been learned from Asia and even other countries in Latin America that had handled pandemics of a respiratory nature in the past. Leko?
All right. So what has been the reaction now from relatives of those who actually lost their lives during the pandemic, as well as from the main political parties on the outcomes from the inquiry? What has been their response to this?
I think, first of all, we need to acknowledge that there's been a change of government. But during the course of the COVID, both the Labour Party, who were the opposition at the time, and the Conservatives, who were the government, worked together. There wasn't much opposition in terms of how the COVID was handled. The two parties, the two main parties, appeared to have been working together. What we have heard from the relatives or representatives or the voices of those that are representing the relatives of those that were lost, especially Professor Naomi Fodong, who's been speaking on behalf of the bereaved families. They've said that they take note of the findings. They agree in basic terms with what has been found, but then they also outline that there are other areas where the report could have gone, in particular, the role that was played by inequalities in society, because when you look at the statistics, there were communities that appeared to have been more vulnerable to the pandemic than others, especially ethnic minorities, people who were kind of in frontline jobs, and those that were in nursing homes in particular during the course of the beginning of the pandemic, before a lot of people understood how to reduce infections. And they have spoken, I think, in particular about the fact that the government appeared to have been dealing with the consequences of the pandemic rather than the what was actually behind the pandemic and trying to reduce infections in particular. Lekon?
Okay, I now know that the Prime Minister, Keir Starmer rather, is actually particularly interested in this and trying to ensure that this stops and they get it right, hoping fully that there won't be a pandemic some other time. So how will this new Labour government now try and improve the UK's preparedness for another pandemic? Hopefully there won't be none anyway.
There's continuity in government. It really doesn't matter who is in government. Whoever is there now, these recommendations, now that they've been made, they relate to the government that is there now. So Wes Streeting and Keir Starmer, who is now the Prime Minister, they have to look at these findings. There are certain timelines that have been put in there, like reports that are needed, in terms of the recommendations, forming those committees that need to be looking at what is likely to be coming, and will the country be ready to handle or tackle those particular issues. So this now falls on Keir Starmer and his government. There's no running away from it. But then also there are a lot of good people that are working in the industry. We have to acknowledge that, especially like some of the people who handled, who are both in the medical field and advising, and some of them learned this, like Chris Whitty. He learned, he stayed in Nigeria, he understood. So a lot of people say that background of being in other places and other countries, like Chris Whitty, having spent time in Nigeria, assist input into these committees that are now needed to look at how should the country respond to any pandemic in the event that one might be visiting us in future.
Okay, Thamsaka Jo, journalist and global affairs analyst, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us.
Thank you for having me.
We'll now go on a very short break on Beyond the Continents. We'll be back in a bit. Stay with us. Many thanks for staying with us. We're still in Europe, and we tell you that UK leader Keir Starmer has pledged on Thursday that his new Labour government would never leave the European Convention on Human Rights, adding that it would approach the issue of irregular migration with humanity. Starmer, elected 2 weeks ago, has scrapped the controversial scheme in which Britain has paid Rwanda hundreds of millions of pounds without any migrants being forcibly sent there. At the opening session of the European Political Community Summit, he said his government will not commit taxpayers' money to gimmicks and illegality, and why he will never withdraw from the European Convention on Human Rights. The UK is a founding member of the Council of Europe that is responsible for the ECHR, playing a key role in its drafting and becoming the first country to ratify the convention in 1951.
To set a new path on illegal migration, to transform the way that we work together on border security and law enforcement, and to say together, no more. This government will not commit taxpayer money to gimmicks. We are here to serve our country in the national interest, in pursuit of solutions that will actually deliver results. And more than that, we will approach this issue with humanity and with a profound respect for international law. And that's why we scrapped the unworkable Rwanda scheme on day one. And it's why we will never withdraw from the European Convention on Human Rights.
European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen on Thursday won a second 5-year term as she promised to see the EU bolstering its defense capability, strengthening its industry, and tackling a housing crisis. Von der Leyen received votes from 401 members of European Parliament in the 720-seat chamber backing her over the 361-vote majority she needed to remain head of the EU's executive body. There were 284 lawmakers who voted against in the secret ballot held during the first parliamentary session since EU-wide elections in June. The German ex-defense minister, who became the first woman leader of the European Commission in 2019, had presented herself as the best and most experienced captain to serve the Commission, but it has been a rocky path to reaching this point. The EU's 27 leaders fiercely debated her candidacy in June before putting her name forward. Moving on now, Italy is currently grappling with an extreme heat wave originating from Africa, prompting authorities to issue a red alert for high temperatures in 11 cities. The severe weather condition has led to scorching heat in the capital, Rome, where temperatures were recorded between 40 degrees Celsius and 42 degrees Celsius at noon. In Rome, tourists have been seen to use umbrellas to shield from the scorching sun, while a long queue forms at the public water fountains, particularly at the Barassia fountain in the front of the Spanish Steps, as heat wave hits the Italian capital. The Ministry of Health, which categorizes temperature risk levels into 4 color codes, elevated Rome to the highest red category on Thursday as the heat wave continues to intensify.
In South Africa, we've got a place called the Drakensberg, which is the hilly mountain area that is known to be extremely hot. But the fact, and that has very similar temperatures to here. So the fact that it's, like, I can imagine myself going on a hike in the mountains in this heat, but I'm in the city, which is very confusing.
Romane. Oui, on était avertis, donc voilà, on savait qu'il allait faire très chaud, on s'est équipés, éventail, bouteille d'eau, et voilà. L'avantage d'avoir de l'eau à disposition dans les fontaines, c'est vraiment super. Voilà.
Y agua y buscando sombras y manteniéndome lo más hidratado posible.
But I'll tell you that André Chassagné becomes the new Popular Front candidate for the presidency of the National Assembly. The new Popular Front left-wing alliance was hastily assembled before the snap election. They want to run the government but have been fighting bitterly since then over who to put forward as Prime Minister. It hopes its candidate for Parliament's chief, veteran communist lawmaker André Chassagné, who is well liked across party lines, could be elected. This could be a boost to its chances of coming and forming a government by showing the alliance can command a majority in the assembly. Benjamin Lucas, a Green lawmaker from the NFP group, says Chassagné's election would show Parliament's freedom and independence from the executive.
Pour le moment, j'appelle à une chose, c'est qu'on ait le courage de répondre aux urgences qui sont apparues, qui se sont manifestées, urgences sociales, qui sont montées de nos territoires. avec... Attendez, d'abord, pour moi, ce qui me semble important, c'est qu'il y a des gens qui sont en souffrance, qui sont en colère, qui ont pu l'exprimer par un vote extrême, et notamment un vote d'extrême droite. Il faut donc apporter une réponse. Il y a aujourd'hui dans notre pays, il y a une fracture. La République est abîmée. Donc la première réponse à apporter, c'est au niveau social. Et à partir de là, à partir d'un socle, la question c'est de savoir comment on va gouverner le pays. Est-ce qu'on peut le gouverner uniquement avec le nouveau Front populaire ou est-ce qu'il faut élargir à d'autres sur un contenu progressiste qui permettra d'être dans la durée? Voilà la seule réponse que je peux apporter aujourd'hui. Mais en tout cas, dire aujourd'hui ça se passera de telle ou telle façon, je pense que c'est amuser à la galerie et j'ai pas l'habitude d'amuser à la galerie.
We're still in France. I will tell you that a French country hunts arson suspects on Thursday after an apartment building fire killed 7 people in southern French city Nice. As French Prime Minister Gabriel Attal says, 3 individuals are being sought after, perhaps of criminal origin. Prime Minister Attal said the fire killed 7 people who tried to escape by jumping from a window, and the investigation is ongoing. 3 individuals are being sought as the surveillance footage showed 3 men wearing balaclavas in the vicinity. The apartment is in the low-income neighborhood of Le Moulin, known for being a drug-dealing hub in the west of the city, which the apartment was occupied by a family believed to have Comoran origins.
Je le dis d'ores et déjà, l'enquête progresse. Premiers éléments ont pu être recueillis, 3 individus sont recherchés. Je le dis ici, tous les moyens sont mis en œuvre pour retrouver les auteurs, qui seront retrouvés et qui seront très sévèrement punis. De nouveau, le procureur fera un point cet après-midi avec l'ensemble des détails. C'était donc essentiel pour nous, pour Gérald Darmanin, moi-même, évidemment aux côtés du maire de Nice, d'être ici pour témoigner de la solidarité, du soutien de la nation aux victimes, à leurs familles, à tous les Niçois. Ce sont évidemment aujourd'hui tous les Français et c'est toute la nation qui pleure ce drame absolument terrible.
Away from that, a Russian court on Thursday has sentenced U.S. citizen Michael Travis Leak to 13 years in prison on drug smuggling charges. Michael Travis Leak is a musician and former U.S. paratrooper. He was arrested in June 2023 and accused of organizing a drug-dealing business involving young people. He was jailed alongside Veronica Grabanchuk and other defendants convicted of drug offenses. The pair were shown standing in a court cage in brief videos published by the court service. He was found guilty of selling drugs on a large scale. Leak is one of about a dozen of Americans currently held in Russian detention. Now, addressing the opening session of the European Political Community Summit, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky on Thursday slammed any attempts to cut deals with Moscow behind Kyiv's back after Hungary's Prime Minister Viktor Orban visited a Russian leader, Vladimir Putin. Addressing European counterparts at a summit in Britain's grandiose Blenheim Palace, the Ukrainian leader called for unity in support of Kyiv as it fights the Russian invasion. The call for a unified voice from Europe came after Orban, who also attended the UK meeting, upsetting his EU counterparts by meeting Russia's president. Orban visited Moscow on July 5 as part of what he described as a peace mission over the war in Ukraine that also involved visits to Kyiv, Beijing, and former US President Donald Trump.
First, we have maintained unity in Europe and are acting together, which means that Putin has missed his primary target. He has failed to create division in Europe. The more decisive Europe is in preserving this unity, the long-lasting peace we will ensure. But if someone in Europe tries to resolve issues behind others' backs or even at the expense of someone else, if someone wants to make some trips to the capital of war to talk and perhaps promise something against our common interests or at the expense of Ukraine or other country, then why should we consider such a...
A bit of sports before we wrap it up. The athletes' village for the Paris Olympics and Paralympics has officially opened and welcomed its first inhabitants on Thursday. The village to the north of Paris will house nearly 14,500 people, including 9,000 athletes at its peak. 8 days before the opening ceremony, the first teams to arrive were Australia and Brazil. Organizers are proud of offering a village that they say does not require air conditioning to keep residents cool, with temperatures inside set to be at least 6 degrees Celsius lower than outside in summer. However, some delegations have reportedly ordered their own air conditioning units anyway.
Very excited. It's nice weather to it as well, so looking forward to the next couple of weeks here. Yeah, well, in the hockey pool, both pools are very challenging. So we know we've got 5 games in the pool stages that need us to focus on one game at a time. We start off with the world #1 ranked team, the Netherlands, but we've got Germany, we've got Spain, and we've got Great Britain as well, so there's no easy game.
We can only hope so, yeah, that's the plan. So we'll see what happens, it'll be tough, but yeah, very exciting.
Nada, la verdad que es un orgullo tremendo estar acá, poder venir con la selección de rugby 7, que es la primera vez en la historia que clasifica a unas Olimpiadas. Así que nada.
French midfielder Adrien Rabiot will depart Serie A club Juventus after the club's sporting director Cristiano Guintoli confirmed on Thursday that the France midfielder's contract would not be renewed. Rabiot leaves Juve after 5 years in which he won the 2020 Serie A title and 2 Italian Cups. The 29-year-old has played 48 times for France, scoring 4 goals, and was a runner-up at the last World Cup in Qatar. Rabiot played 5 times at the Euro 2024, where the Blues were eliminated in the semi-finals by eventual winner Spain. Italian media report that AC Milan and Real Madrid are among the teams interested in signing Rabiot, who reportedly refused a 2-year contract extension worth €7.5 million a season. And that's all on Beyond the Continent. Don't forget to send your eyewitness report to the WhatsApp number and email on your screen. Or you can follow us on social media. We are at News Central TV. And you can also watch News Central live on DSTV channel 422, Star Times channel 274, Avo TV and YouTube. Many thanks for watching. I am Lekon Onobanjo.